Hey guys, I'm Addison with Manifest Kombucha, and today we are diving headfirst into Kombucha 101, an easy guide to successfully brewing kombucha in the comfort of your own home. So before we dive into the good stuff, I do need to note that although I am brewing in my commercial kitchen space, since this is purely for demonstrative purposes, I'm going to be brewing today as if I were just brewing in the comfort of my own home. So you may or may not see me doing things that I would otherwise be doing if this brew were for commercial purposes. Anyway, on to the good stuff. So before we get started brewing, let's go over our kombucha ingredients and your kombucha toolkit. Kombucha is an extremely simple thing to make. You just need a few ingredients that you likely already have in your home already. So first off, you're going to need some refined white or cane sugar. You'll also need black tea, either loose leaf or tea bags. And if you are using loose leaf tea, you'll also want something to strain it with as well, like a tea bag or a tea ball. You need water divided out. And then for the fun part, you are going to need some kombucha starter liquid, which is just kombucha that has already successfully undergone a first fermentation. And then this is optional, but recommended to have a SCOBY as well. You'll see here we have a big mama SCOBY, but don't worry, your SCOBY does not need to be this size. So if you have brewed kombucha before, you will already very likely have an established starter liquid and quite possibly a SCOBY ready to go and use in this batch. However, if this is your very first time brewing kombucha ever, you will need to purchase starter liquid. And very often the liquid does come with a starter pellicle already. So if you're looking to brew kombucha but don't have starter liquid or a SCOBY yet, my business, Manifest Kombucha Co., sells a ready-to-go starter kit. It includes enough starter liquid to successfully brew a gallon of kombucha, and then it also has a piece of SCOBY in there as well. This is the exact same starter and SCOBY combination that I use to brew over 100 gallons a week. So it has a very good track record. And we've had a lot of great feedback about other people who have purchased the starter kits having success with their brews as well. You can find these starter kits for sale on our website or on our Instagram. I'll put the link down below. And then as far as your brewing toolkit goes, also very simple. You're going to need a stock pot or a saucepan, a vessel that can hold at least a gallon of liquid, a long-handled spoon, a clean, lightweight cloth, something like a tea towel or even like a coffee filter will work great, and then a rubber band or kitchen twine to keep the cloth in place on the vessel. Okay, we have our ingredients, we have our supplies, let's get brewing. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is make your sweet tea concentrate. So we're going to set about half of our water on the stove to boil. So our water is boiling. From here, we're going to add in our sugar and give that a very thorough stir until all of the sugar is completely dissolved. This is also the point where you can turn off your burner. And from here, I am adding my tea into my little tea bag here, and I am going to let it steep in the sugar water. I'll let it steep for maybe 10 to 15 minutes. Any longer than that, it gets a little bitter, and which we want to avoid. But you also want to give the leaves sufficient time to bloom, which means just kind of open up and be able to steep as effectively as possible, and to get all that nice robust flavor and release all the nutrients so your kombucha has sufficient food. Okay, so while we're letting that steep, let's talk starter and SCOBY. So a common misconception with kombucha brewing is that a SCOBY is vital for a successful kombucha ferment, when in actuality, what you really, really want is a strong and established starter liquid. A SCOBY is simply the byproduct of the fermentation process. So as long as you have a nice, strong starter liquid to brew with, a SCOBY, in theory, should form during your brewing process. So even though I'll be brewing with Mama Myrtle here today, who's pretty thick, you absolutely do not need a SCOBY that looks like this. In fact, you do not necessarily need a SCOBY at all. Okay, our tea has been steeping for about 12 minutes, so we have a nice, strong, concentrated sweet tea going on back here. However, it is, of course, blazing hot because it just came off of the stove, hasn't had sufficient time to cool down. That is a problem because we do not want to introduce our beautiful living starter liquid to scalding hot sweet tea because it'll kill it. Hence why we divided our water out at the beginning. So what we want to do is have nice cool water filled up about halfway into our brewing vessel. So now we can go ahead and add our hot sweet tea into our nice cool water here, and it will expedite the cooling process. So you don't have to wait for your sweet tea to cool down. Once that's added, just make sure that it actually is lukewarm. If you're a little more science-based, you want it to be around like 95 to 100 degrees. Since this is just a demonstration and I'm showing you what I would just be doing if I were brewing at home for my family and I just use my finger. It feels lukewarm to me. So we are good to go to add in our starter liquid. So from here, just add it on in. And I like to give it a nice stir just to incorporate. All right, at this point, you want to make sure that there is still enough headroom to fit your SCOBY. Depending on your SCOBY size, you might need a little more headroom like I do. If your SCOBY is pretty petite, you won't need as much headroom. But go ahead and slide it in there. Yep, that's perfect. And your SCOBY may just kind of do what it wants to do in there. It may stay and float at the top. It might hang out in the middle. It might sink all the way to the bottom. Just like SCOBY size doesn't necessarily matter, SCOBY placement within the vessel doesn't really matter either. As your brew ferments, a new baby SCOBY should form across the top of your vessel, and your mother SCOBY may be connected to it, or it may not. There may just be a baby on the top and a mama floating around on the bottom or in the middle. All of those are perfectly fine as long as your new SCOBY looks like it is growing healthfully. So at this point, you are pretty much done. Wasn't that easy? So I like to wipe off the rim of my jar just to make sure my clean cloth doesn't get SCOBY juice or bits on it. And then from here, this is where your lightweight woven cloth, tea towel, flour sack towel, coffee filter will come into place, just as long as there aren't any holes in it and that it's breathable enough where your kombucha can get oxygen. Go ahead and secure it on with a rubber band. And that is your brew. You're finished. Congratulations. So at this point, you'll want to find somewhere sort of out of the way in your house to leave your SCOBY to ferment. Anywhere from 7 to 21 days is typical or normal. You'll want this place to be at a constant room temperature, away from drafts and direct sunlight, and just sort of away from general disturbances as well, where you know that it will have sufficient oxygen flow. For me at my house, that's just a corner of my kitchen counter. So we've got our kombucha set aside. We're letting it ferment anywhere between 7 and 21 days. A good rule of thumb is at the 7-day mark is when you can start testing it for doneness. And this is totally subjective. If you taste your kombucha on day 7 and you are like, yeah, this is perfect, that's amazing. You can go ahead and drink it as is, or you can move on to a second fermentation if you want to carbonate it or flavor it. If you taste your kombucha on day 7 and you're like, nope, that's too sweet for me, it doesn't taste done, I'd like it to continue fermenting, that's great too. Just go ahead and cover it back up and let it sit for a while longer. The warmer the environment that the kombucha is fermenting in, the faster that it will ferment. And adversely, the colder the environment is, the slower it will ferment. If you are a little more techie and want to test your kombucha's pH level, an appropriate pH range for kombucha is anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5. So you could use that to confirm your kombucha doneness if you wanted. Thank you so much for joining along with me today. I hope that this tutorial was helpful, simple, and made kombucha brewing seem approachable. Feel free to reach out below with any questions, and happy brewing, you guys.